Hello Kerbinauts and welcome to my Let's Play series where we follow the history of spaceflight and have our own adventures in Kerbal Space Program. Today we're playing with the demo version of Kerbal Space Program so everyone can play along at home, but we'll use the full version of the game when our goals get a little more complex. We're continuing our adventure in the Soviet Union. The Soviets had cut off scientific ties to the West and intended to show that in the post-World War II world, the more technologically advanced you were, the more that was a sign that your ideology, in this case communism, was superior. The U.S. Had explained itself to its citizens as a technological powerhouse, and really the thought of the day in the U.S. was that the Soviet Union was kind of this backwards country. So the Soviets built a satellite called Sputnik and put a few scientific instruments inside to measure temperatures and pressures during orbit. The instruments transmitted their information similar to how the beeps of Morse code are sent, but much simpler. These beeps were transmitted via radio in a way that was detectable by ham radio operators around the world. So when it was eventually launched, the satellite, which was polished and its booster intentionally had reflectors on it, they could be seen as they passed overhead at night. And also it could be picked up on amateur radio operators within the U.S. and other countries. There was no denying that the Soviets had been the first to find a way to orbit the Earth, and the radio signals were a constant reminder as the satellite passed overhead for the next 22 days. Sputnik would eventually orbit the Earth 1,440 times until it re-entered the atmosphere and burned up. The reaction to Sputnik in the United States was one of panic by many citizens, and that the U.S. and Soviet Union both had nuclear weapons, but only the Soviet Union had a rocket that could deliver these weapons anywhere on the planet at a moment's notice. The U.S. government had known for a while that Sputnik was coming from its U-2 spy plane photos, but it had severely underestimated the reaction by its citizens. So what we're going to do today is try to replicate Sputnik in Kerbal Space Program. It's a pretty simple task to do. It's just a ball with a few antennas off of it. But the orbit was interesting because it's an elliptical orbit, and we'll have a little look at how to do that in KSP. So what we're going to do today is try to replicate the orbit of Sputnik. Now, it wasn't a perfectly round orbit around the Earth. It orbited from 223 kilometers to 1,450 kilometers, so it was a pretty good elliptical orbit there. Converting that over to Kerbin, we're just going to say 100 kilometer orbit up to about a 700 kilometer orbit. That'll give us about the rough idea of what it looked like. Now what the Soviets did was they took one of their 6,000 kilometer range R7s and removed the booster, and you take this nuclear warhead on its own and you make a satellite exactly the same size as the warhead. It kind of gets the point across. Now there was a reason for this, is who wants to reinvent the wheel and build a whole new rocket just for the satellite? So make the satellite the same size as a nuclear warhead. But it gets across another point too, is that we just put something into orbit that's the same size as a nuke, and we were able to successfully fly it over your country. So we'll change the satellite just a little bit, and we're going to try and make ourselves 4 little antennas here to stick off here for radio antennas. I'm going to use these, now they call them mobility enhancers, but they're ladders. And let's see, I need 4 of them. Not worried about the door, because again we're still pretending that this is an unmanned craft. Turn on the angle snap. Now that's not really the direction the antennas point on Sputnik, so what we're going to do is I'm going to press the WASD keys, try and rotate this around and make it look like I want to. Okay, so that was just pressing D. Now I'm going to press S. Close. I'll call that close enough. We don't need our warhead anymore. Does it look good? Yeah, it looks good. We'll just put it on there. pretend that's the rounded bottom of the Sputnik there, and I'll add the booster back on. So let's head on out to the launch pad. Okay, so our first goal is to get up to 100 kilometers, and once we're there, we'll do a little bit of a burn to try and get into a round orbit, and then we'll just keep that burn up to get up into that 700 kilometer apoapsis. So there's a periapsis and an apoapsis. The periapsis is the lowest point in your orbit. That's going to be our 100 kilometers. And the apoapsis is going to be the highest point in your orbit. That's going to be 700 kilometers in this case. So let's just get the rocket up to 100 kilometers. Curious to see if I have enough fuel here to create an elliptical orbit, but there's one way to find out. You'll also notice that the ladders are collapsed. So I can extend them if I need to, but we're going to leave them alone. So I don't want that to necessarily be sticking out while I'm flying around, but you can see kind of what they're going to do. Alright, put that away. And okay, ready to go. Try to save as much fuel as I can. Again, that thick atmosphere down here, I don't necessarily need it. Need it at full throttle, because it's not doing any good anyway. Having it even near half throttle seems to be more than adequate. So we'll get up to the point where we're going to drop these side boosters, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so we can see that I already have some good horizontal movement going here, because I was on a rotating planet when I took off, so it's kind of flinging me out towards the east. And we're done with that. And we're at about 24,000 kilometers now. I'm going to nose over. There's not that much air up here, so it really doesn't matter that I'm flying sideways at this point. And if I just lock that in to level, see how high it's going to go. Nah, not quite. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to control it from the wheel down here. Turn the SAS off. I do still want to be pitched up just a little bit. I'm going to throttle all the way up. Now that we're up out of the atmosphere, I can get a lot of work done with this rocket. And I want to see this apoapsis point stay out way in front of me, because that'll give me a nice flat trajectory. I'm already pretty high at 40,000 meters. Probably don't need to be pitched up that much, but you can see the more I pitch down, whoop, do a little barrel roll there. The more I pitch down, the more this apoapsis is going to move back towards me. And the more I pitch up, the farther it's going to go out in front of me. So I don't want it too far out in front of me, because then I'm just sitting there in the atmosphere for too long. But I also don't want it behind me, because that means the highest point of my trajectory is already done. And that's bad, because it means I'm going down. Alright. Just kind of bring this out to, I'm going to start throttling back just a little bit. It's already out to 87,000. Nope, coming offline a little bit. And about 100,000 meters right there. So that's good. You can see I'm going to land out here, but if we come and check our fuel, oh, we've got good fuel. Great. So I forgot to hit the SAS here, so it didn't lock my position too well. I started wandering a little bit, but we're still in the atmosphere, but flying up at a really good rate. We've got the stars out. Got a nice bright white booster here, so everybody at the in the other country there can see that we're overhead. The booster was actually way more visible than Sputnik was itself. Sputnik was a polished ball basically, but the booster had some intentional reflectors on it, so a lot of people were able to see the booster a lot easier than the actual satellite. But once you saw one or the other, the booster was in orbit, just like it's going to be now, with the satellite. So you could see it chasing the satellite as it went around the Earth just short of 1,500 times. So I'm actually not going to deorbit our Sputnik. I'm just going to let it go around, and we'll keep it around for posterity's sake as the series goes on. But if I wanted it to be more like Sputnik, what I would do I'd say, okay, well, the atmosphere starts at 70,000 kilometers or so. I'll just set my lowest point, my periapsis, at about 69,000. So every time it would just kind of skim through the atmosphere just a little bit and slow down just a little bit more. And what that would do is it would bring that far point. I'm actually missing the apoapsis at this point. Oh, jeez. Trying to talk and fly at the same time. So anyway, what would happen was it would bring that, and now I'm back in the atmosphere. No. Okay. All right, try and talk and fly there, sorry. So we can see now, because I'm pitched up just a little bit, that point's coming back. I'm going to turn the throttle off. Well, and I'm going to use the engine to rotate me just a little bit. All right, now we're locked in there on the same path as our trajectory. At 98,000 meters, that's close enough. I'm just going to burn this. And Sputnik went 7 times higher than its periapsis, so for us, it's going to be 100 to 700. And that's close enough. It's about what it looks like. So, here's what it looked like. And it's pretty interesting to see how they did that. There's a few things you can do so you get scientific data from this low atmosphere, or from this low orbit right above the atmosphere, to pretty far away from the planet. But you also get a nice delay, because as you're slowing down coming up the top here, a lot of time passes and the Earth can revolve, and you can come see something that's pretty different on your second pass. So there are other ways to accomplish that, but it's pretty neat. So now it comes down to, we need to launch the satellite. So I want to make sure I launch it in the same orbit that I'm pointing. I'm going to lock it in here. And we're going to say So one thing I forgot, that these don't have the explosive bolts on them that help propel the satellite forward. Because this is my SAS module and not a decoupler. So I'll be right back. There's our troublemaker. Alright, well, you see why I made the mistake here. So if we come in and we say SAS module, that's this. It's not what we want. Then here's the decoupler. Okay. There. Yeah, I don't want the satellite to eject at the same time as the 4 side boosters. So I'll fix that. And then the parachute can be whatever it is. That's fine. Alright, let's get back in the same orbit. Alright, so on our way back up, here's our first stage, the boosters dropping off. There goes our apoapsis. Looking really good. Nice and strong. And that's 100,000. Now you can see if you're watching in HD, which I encourage you to do with this series because these graphics are great in this game. The apoapsis will drop as time goes by. I'm actually in 2x warp right here so you can see it. But for as long as I'm in the atmosphere, it'll drop. But as soon as I exit out, see that number's not going down anymore. So whenever I'm in the air, it'll be causing drag. It'll be pulling that in. And that's exactly what Sputnik did. Alright, so let's warp up to the apoapsis. I'll establish that 700 kilometer apoapsis, 100 kilometer periapsis, and we'll come back. Okay, so here we go. 100,000 meters and 704,000 meters. So almost perfect. There we are. And we'll come back in, and there's our highly reflective booster. Let's try this again. There we go. So now I need to deploy my antennas, which will be my scientific data, back down. And there we go. So there's Sputnik 1 flying overhead. Showing its dominance over the other countries on Kerbin. And what we'll do is go ahead and close out this episode now. This is a pretty short one, but thanks for coming by. And if you like this episode, give it a like, give me a subscribe, leave a comment if you like. Let me know that you like what I'm doing so I keep doing it. I really like doing this, so I hope that you're enjoying it as well. Here's KSP coming up underneath us. And I hope to see you here next time on KSP Space History. Thanks. Bye-bye.